So I want to talk about how I was introduced to self-compassion. So several years ago, a friend of mine who was a therapist and a really good friend, after my book, The Time Cleanse, came out by McGraw-Hill, he asked me, he said, "Hey, Stephen, how are you doing? How are you treating yourself?" And, at first I gave him the standard stock answers. Everything's great. The book's going great. But the reality was, when I went home that night, I realized I was really beating myself up. I'd spent, a solid year, producing the book, many years before that working on it. And then when it came out, it had success. It made some best-selling lists, but it wasn't a New York bestseller. My agent was like, "I hope we can make this a bestseller." And I realized when I took a step back that 0.5% of all books produced are New York bestsellers. But this old self, this old critical self was beating myself up. And I realized, through my whole athletic career, that any failure I had, I would just berate myself. And I would never be satisfied. And that was kind of happening in my life at the same time. It was like no matter what success I had, I still just didn't feel good enough. So after he had brought this up, interesting enough, like a week later, he said, "Hey, there's this workshop on self-compassion. Do you want to go?" So I went. And it was a workshop put on by Kristin, Neff, and Gremer. These are what I would consider the two top researchers in the world on this topic. And so I'm sitting there for 2 days, and it was good. And then all of a sudden, I think I heard Chris say, "And there's many pieces of research that increases performance." And I felt like I was the only person in the room that heard that. I was like, I really want to know about that. So they had a special lunch that, you could go to where you could meet them. So I paid my entrance fee. I moved my rubber chicken to the side. And then for an hour, I just fired questions at them. And they were just kind of looking at me like, this guy is really focused on this performance part. And from there, I was hooked. I started using the tools and started seeing the results for me and my clients. And I was so engaged and motivated. I did the teacher training they had at the Mindful Center for Self-Compassion and did many other trainings. And it really made this big difference. It's the biggest difference for me and my clients in the last several years than any single tool.